There we go. That's perfect. Right, so language fact as usual, your brilliant photos, which will take quite some time. Thanks, guys. That was faffing around. I use a product called OBS, Open Broadcast System, I think, Open Broadcast Software, and it's the streaming software. So it's a piece of software that sits between YouTube and me, so I can load up all the stuff into it and then work through it. And the best thing about it is it's free. It's not the easiest thing to learn, but there are loads of YouTube videos out there, so it's not too bad. Okay, so a lightning quiz, masterpiece. We're going to look at Richard Avedon this week, and then we're going to look at Aperture, the video that I've made, a quick quiz, a little bit more on Aperture, only about 30 seconds, and then the assignment for next week. Now, the assignment for next week is actually going to be a competition, so you've got 1 week to get all of your entries in. Right, I think that's that bit done. So let's talk about the language fact. I want to look at the word optical. The word optical is used a great deal in photography, and it's from the Greek optos, that means seen or visible. And there's a difference between DSLR cameras and other digital cameras. And a DSLR camera, a digital single lens reflex camera, has an optical viewfinder, which means that what you see is actually what you're going to get. You're looking through glass or through a lens, if you like, at what you're going to be capturing. Whereas a digital viewfinder, like you've got on your phones, it's giving you a digital approximation of what you're shooting. So, and the word optics is often used to talk about lenses. So there we go. That's the fact of the week, the language fact of the week. So let's get into the next part of this, which is your amazing photos. Let's make this nice and big. No, not that one. Let's try that one instead. There we are. Your photos have got better and better and better every single week. Daisy, I absolutely love this. This is, anyone know the name for this, for the sort of lens that might take this kind of shot? And Daisy's actually achieved this shot by not using that type of lens. I've got to be careful moving because I've got a dog under my chair. What is the type of lens that is often used to capture something like this? Does anyone know? No? Well, never mind. Let me know if you can work out what it is. So this is shot through the keyhole, and it just gives this wonderful sort of this wonderful shot of outside. And I love the way you've got the pathway, the paving slabs leading away. It is a kind of wide angle, Shajiv. It's actually called a fisheye lens. It's a fisheye lens that's often used for that. All right, so let's go on to the next one, and we've got Daisy. I love this Daisy. That is such a delicate shot. The bokeh, the quality of the blur is fabulous. I think the patterns are absolutely wonderful. I think your placement is perfect. Rule of thirds. I think it's a really cracking shot. Brilliant. I absolutely love that. Equally, this Erin Coco Chanel, I think that is a great product shot. I think you've brought it out really well. I imagine that's a miniature. It looks very small, but of course you can't tell. But I think that is a great shot. I love the simplicity of it. I love the fact the background is not in any way distracting from whatever else is going on. I think that's fabulous. All right, so that was Coco Chanel. Shajiv, our resident flower expert, has produced this. I think this is great. I love the colours. I love the fact that you have got the plant so perfectly in focus. I think that's great. And I think also I just like the way that you thought about the background. Maybe that vase in the background doesn't necessarily need to be there, but I think that's a very strong shot. Although this one's better. I love the way this is a diagonal. I love the vibrancy of the colours you brought out there, Shajiv. I thought that was a wonderful shot. Indeed, and we go again. I think my favourite of all of them was probably this one here. This one's possibly trying to do too much, and I think it's interesting that I don't know quite which one to look at. And maybe that's me, but again, I think you've really caught the colours beautifully. Those sort of pink mauve shades there look absolutely great. So a series of really good shots there. This one, Shajiv, I love because it's so sharp and you can see exactly where the focus point is on this picture. And I'm guessing it's something that you're doing more now that we've had these sort of instructional lessons, that you're looking at the point of focus, that you're thinking more about the technical aspects and then how that can bring you a bit closer into making better creative decisions. I'm a fan, Gabe. I like this. this was our patterns assignment, and I think that came out really, really well. So this one ticks the box of many, it ticks the box of regular, and it's breaking the pattern all the way through. So you've actually created a fifth way of describing patterns, which I think is absolutely fantastic, Gabe. So well done. What a great shot that is. And again, I think the angle that you've done it at works really well. Again, it's all going towards the edge of the frame, so we imagine the Lego carrying on forever as it does. I saw a headline about how many Lego pieces they had made, and it was into the billions. It was quite a scary number, a huge amount of plastic. Erin, I love this. This is such a fabulous photograph, and you've got the focus absolutely spot on. And it's not easy with something this small. It's actually a very difficult thing to do. Talk about YouTube. I was watching someone who was removing an enormous wasp nest or a hornet nest from a home in America. And he stopped talking for a moment, and you could listen to this scratching sound, which was the sound of the larva inside these little cubicles, whatever they're called, the little honeycombs themselves, and they were scratching with their with their pincers to try to get attention, to get fed. It was quite disturbing, actually. But that's a great shot, Erin. What a fabulous shot that is. Katie, I think that a lot of respect goes out here for realizing this is a pattern, and I only really twigged when I looked at this and thought, oh, it's just V's, isn't it? It's a series of V's, even though it's VW. It's a series of V's. So I think A, well spotted, and B, well captured. It's really nice. I love the glow coming off the badge as well. What a great shot. What else have we got? Katie, I love this. A series, it's a pattern, which is, I suppose, it's irregular. It's many. It's coming off the edges of the frame and it's stretching away into the distance somewhere. I think it's a really good shot. Well done. And it's also a way of seeing the usual and the, I suppose, the average, and turning it into something special. Katie, this is the worst pun I have ever heard in my life. Perpendicular. I mean, it's enough to drive you quackers. It really is. And I'm not trying to duck the issue. It's just, that is shocking. It's a great shot, and they are perpendicular ducks. You've got to be careful how you say that. But it's that has to be the worst pun ever. Until the next one that you do, that is. But cracking go at it. Anyway, it did make me chuckle. Katie, I love this. The hanging cone, I think it looks great. And I love the way that you've managed to bring two, I suppose, quite separate elements into the photo. And that's the path winding its way into the distance. And you've got the cone, which is really sharp in the foreground. I think it works really well. And the two together, it just works, doesn't it? And it's a very, very good image. I love that. This one here, again, you've just tried to bring in two things, and I think it works well. I like the fact you've got the feather in such good focus, and then you've got the more ducks perpendicular to the camera. This one again, great patterns with the petals, and again the patterns of the what's it called, the inner part of the flower. You guys must have done this in biology quite recently. I've got stamen, stoma. What's that middle bit called? The pollen? I don't know. But I usually kill plants and flowers, but it's a cracking shot. Well done. Sharjeev, another one of these. I love it. I love the way you've turned the vibrance up, and you've chosen a different angle of view. I challenged you last week to go and play with all of these sort of new areas that we've discovered, and I think you've done that really well. And you've turned this into a really interesting image. If you ever go and do a filmmaking course, the angle and the height of the camera are directly linked to how much the character dominates the scene or is dominated in the scene. So if they want to show someone who's in charge and is the king or queen and is important and is quite menacing, then they will shoot from very low. And if they want to make someone feel as though they are lost, alone, lonely and vulnerable, they'll shoot from up above. So I think you've done that really well here, that you've made that character seem as though they are very dominant in the scene. So really good shot there. This was a couple from you, Emily, and I absolutely love this. And it's interesting because the focal point is about halfway along the tablecloth or table or whatever the covering is you've got there, with the cake in the background. And I did work it out. It's a cake in the background. I can spot a cake a mile off, as you probably know. But I love the way that you've got that bouquet, the lovely blur at the front. You've got that sharpness in the midground there. And then towards the back, you can see the cake. And I think this works equally well. If I had to pick between the two, I would struggle, but I think I might just prefer this one, because you've got such a variety in the foreground before we actually hit the cake. I think it's a cracking shot. Well done. I think that's come out incredibly well. Adam, I love this. I'll be interested to know how you put this together. It looks like a series of beams of light or lightsabers, but if you could share how you did that, that would be great. I'm assuming this is a composite that you've made in Photoshop or some kind of image manipulation package, but I think it looks absolutely cracking. And again, we're talking about patterns, and there are many. They're regular, they're repetitive, but they're also irregular. And I guess what breaks the pattern is at the very center of it there. So I thought that was a great shot. Very well done. Let's go on and have a look at the next one. This is Aditya with the shell of a snail. I love the repetitive pattern. You've got that lovely, circle which is going in and in. The curve. I think that's a great shot. Yeah, I do like that. And the nice and the grass also looks vibrant. Aditya, I loved your rainbow. Very hard to capture, and often by the time you've actually managed to line it up, the blinking things disappeared. So I thought you did a really good job there of capturing the rainbow. Pot of gold at the end of it, but I'm not entirely sure about that. So I think that works really, really well. Right, slugs. I hate slugs, I've decided. I didn't realise how much I hated them until you've put up so many pictures of slugs. It's a slug, it's horrible, it's nasty, and I don't like it. Is there some purpose to slugs? I'm not quite sure what it is, other than to sicken me. This one, Erin, I love this, again with patterns. You've gone for a jaunty angle on an old typewriter, and you've given us just enough information there. I think it's a really beautifully crafted shot. You've gone for 16:9 or something even slightly longer maybe. But the angle, what you have included, what you haven't included, I think it's a really lovely shot. And you've got those patterns as well, repeated patterns, and yet each key is totally different. All right, we've got a bridge. I love this. You are cutting from left to right with that lovely horizontal line with a curve in it. I like what you've done with the filter. I think that's worked really well. Hazy day. We've had a lot of hazy days just recently. It's an optical illusion. I took it whilst I was in London at Christmas. It looks very good. I love that. Absolutely fabulous. And thanks for sharing it, because I really enjoyed that, Adam. Great shot, Erin. I love that one. It is almost golden section. We're talking about the bridge, isn't it? Yeah, it is almost golden section. I think it's absolutely fabulous. Rain, rain, go away, come back another day. Yeah, we had a few very rainy days. Has the wind been as mad with you in Crawley as it has in Brighton? It's been absolutely nuts. I've got two dogs, and one of them has refused to leave the house for 2 days because he thinks the wind is just absurd and he doesn't like it. The fact you've included your feet there, Katie, works really well. It gives it a sense of perspective, and I think it's a lovely shot. The rain doesn't stop me. We've got the brolly. We are down by the river, which is lovely. And yeah, I think seeing all the patterns of the rain on the water works really, really well. Follow the leader. We have more ducks. These aren't ducks. What are they? Don't know. Some kind of ducks. I got chased by one once. I think that's a great shot. Lovely. Lots of green. Works incredibly well. Now, this one, Gabe really pushed the boat out here in giving this the most enigmatic name that he could. And after much debate and consideration, he called it a post. However, I think you're doing yourself down slightly, because I think it's a really good picture. I love the way that you've got the pattern going away into the background. You've got the lines converging or trying to converge at the end, but stopped by that green bush. I think it works really well. Talk about golden section. This is all about it. I think it's a really lovely shot, Gabe. Yeah, I think the thing is your eyes are led down towards that green bush. In a perfect world, there'd be something stood at the end of that path, but you can't manufacture things where there aren't things. But I thought that was a great shot, just the same. Really, really positive. Aditya, it's not a slug. Oh, thank goodness. I love this. Colourful candle. This ticks all the boxes for our patterns. It's repetitive. You've got the same sorts of shapes being repeated, but it's also irregular. And you've also got a bit of breaking the chain, making a difference. What do we call it? Breaking the pattern as well. So I think that is a really nice shot. So many good pictures. Rachel took this lovely photo of Water's crown, and this was the idea of playing with shutter speed, and so a fast shutter speed which captures the raindrops in mid-flight, I guess. And this is after the raindrops hit the water, and then it just splashes up like that. Absolutely fabulous. Again, the what are they called? The slow-mo guys. Their videos on YouTube are a fantastic way to waste plenty of time. Another one here from Rachel. This was water ripples. I love this. And you've got those droplets into the air. Paint's a good thing to use. Water, great thing to photograph at a high shutter speed. Comes out really well. What a great shot that is. Now, while you are admiring the beauty of this shot, I wanted to talk to you about the graininess of this image. Now, it may well be, I don't think Rachel's here today, but it may well be that Rachel added this as an effect in post, something like texture. However, I just want to let you know that when you turn up the ISO of an image, that's the sort of grain that you get. And typically you get this kind of grain when there isn't quite enough light to make your picture clear. And it's one of the ways that you're able to get more grain into your light is to turn up the ISO. And it's actually a way of turning up the power that goes to the sensor. In the olden days, when I was younger and people shot on film, you would buy film which had a higher ISO. So if you were going out and shooting in the evening or at night, you would buy a film with a higher rated ISO value, which meant that it was more sensitive to light. So something we're going to talk about a bit next week, because we've done shutter speed, we're doing aperture today, and we're doing ISO next week. And those are the three variables for the light that can go into your camera. But a great shot there. Aditya, I absolutely love this. What on earth is this flower? I thought initially you made it with Play-Doh because it just looks absolutely bananas, doesn't it? It's a crazy flower. I think that is beautiful. And it's sharp. I think it's wonderful. Just great colours as well. And so patterns, it ticks all the boxes. And this is one of those images where putting it absolutely dead centre is the perfect thing to do. Really great shot. Love that, Aditya. And it's not a slug, so bonus marks for that. Have I mentioned that I don't like slugs? I love this, Daisy. Mottled sunlight produced by the shade of trees is always a winner. And I think you've done really well here, that you've got the pattern of the trees and the tree trunks, the pattern of the leaves, and you've also got the pattern of the mottled sunlight on the ground. It's a really, really good shot, Daisy. You produced some cracking images this week. Absolutely love that. And this one, when I first saw it and it said Eye of the Tree, I was thinking, Eye of the Tree, Eye of the Tiger, what's going on? And I started looking. This is a tree that has many eyes and follows you absolutely everywhere. You're in, Daisy, aren't you? Let us know where these were taken. That is an absolutely fabulous tree and so many eyes. And especially if you look at that big, the big branch coming off it, and just on the right-hand side there, that really is like a security camera, isn't it? Marvelous. And we go on to this, a huge house. I like the aspect ratio that you've used. It's 16:9 or wider. I think it works really, really well. And again, repetition, patterns. You have so managed to conquer the assignment that I gave you. It's absolutely astonishing. Really, really impressive. That's great, Daisy. Just a brilliant shot. Absolutely lovely. My words can't do it any justice, really. Well, as if Katie hadn't destroyed us with the first pun, we then have to go for a perpendiculus, which is yeah. Where is that? Where is that shot? Tell us, Daisy, if you're still here. There are no ducks there, and you've managed to kill us twice with your puns. So congratulations, you are the pun meister. So we have Rachel L here with the lovely endless brickwork. You say you're sorry. I'm not convinced. I think it made you chuckle as well. So endless bricks. I love this. Bricks are such a great source just such a great sort of topic to use for photography, because there's so much to them, and bricks weather so beautifully, and if you can get the sunlight raking off them, or some light at home raking off them at the right angle, you can always get some great shots. The sort of textures and patterns you can bring out in bricks are wonderful. All right, we've got another one here from Rachel. This was again the same sort of thing. I like the fact the pattern's been broken up by the ivy, and I like Petworth House. Daisy, where's Petworth House? I think that's very impressive. I've heard of Petworth House. Who lived in Petworth House? On Google, please. Yeah, love this, Rachel. Really, really good. Patterns on the brickwork, old bricks, great, lovely textures, lovely colours, and lovely, deep, rich, vibrant greens for the ivy. Ria, I love this. A road trip. I think we had a road trip from you last time, and these road trip pictures have worked really, really well. I think this looks great. You get the fact that we're in context, we're in a car, and you get the fact that it's sunset, and we can just see the Joe. Any Joe 90? Oh. Yeah, I think it's great. What a fabulous shot this is. I love it, Ria. These work really well. You get the movement. It's just well composed. Great shot. Love it. And last but not very least, another photo from Aditya that does not contain slugs, which gets my complete thumbs up, and it's a glowing foam. You've brought this out really well, Aditya. I love the angle. I love the fact that you've filled the entire frame from left to right, and yet you've left that dark part, that sort of blank part in the background. I think that works really, really well. Well done. All right, I think that was it. Okay, so we can now come to the next section, which is our famous photographer, which is going to be our masterpiece section. Masterpiece. Good. Marvellous. And I found the buttons and everything. Now, I think I said I was going to do Rankin this week, but I didn't. I chose Richard Avedon. It could be Avedon. I'm never quite sure. But it doesn't matter. But he has shot some very interesting images. And we've already established that I'm not going into too much detail on the thinking behind his images, because I think they kind of speak for itself. With the likes of Ansel Adams, it's a more obvious thing to do, and with Cartier-Bresson. But with these sorts of images, it's just need to look at them, really. So, died relatively recently, 16 years ago in 2004, 2004. He cut his teeth using a Kodak box Brownie, which is one of the very sort of first portable cameras that came out. He was a famous portrait and fashion photographer, and he worked for, you might not have heard of Harper's Bazaar, you may have done, it's one of these fashion magazines, but I'm sure you've all heard of Vogue. I'm guessing still the most famous fashion magazine. I don't know, but I think it is the original and the biggest fashion magazine of all time. So he was kind of well known for shooting fashion shots that weren't stilted. If you imagine your average fashion shot, the model almost looks lifeless, that they're there just to model the clothes. He kind of shook up the industry slightly by trying to capture movement in these fashion shops, because of course what you often don't want is movement. You want things to be clear and still. So he tried to bring that out both in the world of fashion, theatre and dance, and he wanted to capture his models who were being emotional, who were expressing emotion, whether it was laughing and smiling. And he also did some work with civil rights workers, politicians and cultural dissidents. So I think this is a good example. I think that is Kate Moss, and I think that's a really interesting take on a fashion photograph, and it's so very different to what had come before. Not stilted, having fun, and yet still with that seriousness that you associate with fashion photography. If you ever watched anything of images of a catwalk, the models strut up and down looking deadly serious as though they're at a funeral. So I like the fact that sort of funereal I suppose the model is still giving off that very somber air, and yet it's quite a fun photo, isn't it? Let's go on to this next one. Anyone know who this model is? This was the very first model. Oh, hang on. Erin's come in with some information here that we need to go to. Let's have a look at this. Erin has said, good Googling. Petworth House in the parish of Petworth, West Sussex. Oh, it's in West Sussex. Is a late 17th century Grade 1 listed country house rebuilt in 1688 by Charles Seymour. Good work. It is Twiggy, Katie. That is impressive. Why does Charles Seymour ring a bell? What's Charles Seymour famous for? It's in Tudor times, wasn't it? Was it anything to do with Henry VIII? What was Henry VIII's? He was there, but Charles Seymour, that rings a bell. Good work there, Erin. And you are absolutely spot on with Twiggy. Let's get back to Twiggy. Yeah, Twiggy, a British model, and she was the first supermodel. She was the one that kicked off all of these sort of supermodels, and then Naomi Campbell and Kate Moss and sort of others joined, and there obviously been many since. But yeah, Twiggy was the first person, the first supermodel. Anyone know who this is? This is a film director, and he made some very scary films. He made a film whose Charles Seymour was the 6th Duke of Somerset. Okay. Do you know what? I might be thinking of, was it Jane Seymour, who was Henry VIII's divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived? I think she was his 6th wife. I could be wrong. Yeah, I think it was Jane Seymour. Probably not linked at all. It is Hitchcock, Katie. You're absolutely spot on. So this is Alfred Hitchcock, who was a very famous film director, and he made... his films are really watchable. Rope is brilliant. Vertigo is great. Psycho is probably the one that he's most well known for. You know, when you hear that and someone's being stabbed in the shower, the Bates Motel and all of that sort of stuff. Not worth watching before you go to sleep, clearly, because they're quite scary. Wasn't particularly nice to his actors. He was quite an interesting character, quite unpleasant in some ways, but I like the way that Avedon has captured him here in just a very unusual pose. He's got something else out of this character that perhaps no one else did. So, yeah, that's a great shot of Hitchcock, and just so simple, isn't it? This one, I'm guessing that you all know who this is. He's apparently, well, no, not apparently, he has just released a new album. He's been going since the year dot. And apparently his new album has been described as a masterpiece. The other interesting fact I love about this guy is that when Jimi Hendrix was saying why he sang along to his music, he said, well, it's only because this guy got away with it. And I thought, if this guy can get away with singing, so can I. Anyone know who this is? Tambourine Man, 60s, beatnik movement. David Bowie, close. First name Bob. Well, we'll see. I've got to say, I'm not actually a massive fan myself, but it's not Bob Bowie. It's Bob someone else. Begins with a D. Let's see what you get for that one. Oh crumbs! I meant to look up who this was. Yeah, Bob Ross. It's yeah, no. It is Bob Dylan. Now, this woman, I meant to look up to see. She's a really famous actor, and she was the. It is Bob Dylan. This woman was the Ice Queen, the nasty queen in the Tales of Narnia, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. She was the evil witch. Is she called the Ice Queen? Someone please Google it and find out, because I meant to look up. She's a really, really famous actor, and I just like the fact that this is. It's as though this is a sort of a documentary photograph, that she doesn't know the camera's there. She's just having a private moment thinking to herself. She's not at all engaging, and yet at the same time, Richard Avedon has managed to elucidate this kind of expression from her. I think it's... Narnia. It was Narnia. She was the evil witch in Narnia. So if anyone can IMDb it and figure out who it is, because I meant to look it up and I forgot. Tilda... Oh, let's have a look. Let's have a look at this. Where are we? Tilda Swinton. Oh, her name doesn't ring a bell at all. Is that who she is? But she was absolutely wonderful as the... Was it the White Witch? I'm trying to remember. It was a really good adaptation, actually. But anyway, that's her. Great shot, isn't it? Really captures something about her, which kind of goes to show, right, all of these people who've done these portrait photographers, every photographer learns how to do the mechanics of it. They can set the aperture, they can set the shutter speed, they can get their lighting sorted out. Although you'll find a lot of these photographers, they've got slightly their own sort of take on the lighting, and you can say, oh, that's a Rankin, that's an Avedon, and so on. But it's their relationship with the model, and I'm thinking back to the Marilyn Monroe photos. Who was it who took those? Yvette Arnold, I think it was, for Marilyn Monroe, and it's getting that something else. It is Tilda Swinton. Okay, good. I didn't doubt you for a second, Adam. I just thought I'd recognise the name, but she's a very famous actor. I think she's done a lot of theatre as well. Anyway, so that was that one. Oh, we're on to quiz. Right, so quiz time. Quiz time. Quiz time. Quiz time. Quiz time. Good. So the quiz time. Let me ask the question, and I shall dive into the live chat and see what answers we get. So the first one is as follows. What is the portable version of the camera obscura? What is the portable version of the camera obscura? What is the portable version of the camera obscura? Oh, yeah. So Gabe has gone for some quality comedy today, Gabe. The camera portable, I like that. It's a good effort. But Katie is absolutely correct with the pinhole. Is indeed the pinhole camera. You get the ding. You are completely correct. So let's go back to the next question. It's the pinhole camera. Remember the camera obscura we looked at last week. Okay. Let's go on to the next one. It is the pinhole camera. Here is the next question for you. Who is this? We covered this person last week. Who is this? Answers in the comments, please. Nose digger? No, it's still not Joe, Gabe. If you keep saying Joe, you're bound to end up getting one of these right. It was last week. He is a person, Erin. The quality of the answers here is, honestly, I'm so proud. He's a person. It's not Joe. It's not Nose digger. Henri Cartier-Bresson. No. Well, I'm impressed that you have managed to pick out two that we did. Well, the time's run out and you all get a big fat... No, useless. It wasn't him. Guy we did last week. He was the dog man. I'm sure that's not how he'd like to be called, actually. He was the guy who photographed dogs a lot. Do you remember the dog images from last week? The Great Dane, and that little tiny thing we couldn't work out what it was. That was him, Elliot Irwitt. Great humour. Okay, so a big fat 0 on that. By the way, Miss Brennan, Mr. Ledbetter, and Mr. Chalmers send their apologies. They're all away. They're all in school today, actually, so in various meetings trying to plan out what's going to happen in September. Who shot this image? I'm sure somebody is actually going to get this one fairly quickly, I imagine. Let's see what we get with this. I'm not going to bother putting on the timer because I don't think I'll have time to do it. It wasn't Ansel Adams, not even twice. No? Any more thoughts about who this could be? It was... I'll give this to... Oh, I think... I'm sorry to say, Gabe, I think we need to give this to Adam because he gave the whole name correctly. And it wasn't Joe. You know, definitely we give it to Adam now. Good. Okay, it was Henri Cartier-Bresson. The fact you're recognising these sorts of things is really good because it helps to understand the different styles that have come out in photography over the years. All right, next one. I don't think you'll get this one right. Maybe, if you were listening last week to my video, a lens with a fixed focal length is also known as a P. So Joe cannot be the correct answer for this one, no matter how... Oh, blimey. Gabe, you are close. You are close. After all that abuse, it begins with a P. It's not pumpkin, partridge, pollock... painting, pinnacle, porridge. Ooh, Erin's got it right. Erin's got it right with prime. What a star you are, Erin. It is prime indeed. It's a prime lens. And it's one that is fixed at a certain focal length. All right, quiet. Take it easy. They tend to be more expensive. So if you're a pro photographer and you're shooting, let's say, a tennis match, a prime lens will generally have a higher grade of glass in it. And because in a tennis match, you're going to be shooting things that are at a similar-ish distance, it's a great piece of kit for it. I mean, they run into the £3,000, £4,000, £5,000. They're very expensive lenses, prime lenses. All right, I think... Oh, that was it. That was the end of quiz time. Quiz time. Quiz time. Quiz time. Quiz time. Right, in spite of my efforts to make this last less time, mind you, I lost 10 minutes at the start, didn't I? So, oh, okay, I've got more of a quiz here. Yeah, let's try this anyway. What does camera obscura mean? What does camera obscura mean? I think I have 5 questions, not 4. So, what does camera obscura mean? Anyone remember? It's not Pinhole Camera, it's not Joe, and it's not Ansel Adams. I can save you some time there. What does camera obscura mean? Inverted image. I like your thinking, Aditya. So you know what it does, but it's not what it means. It was the Latin. It was the language fact from last week. Mirrored, flipped. It's quite Harry Potter, the meaning, really. Another few seconds. Mirrored, flipped, Joe, Ansel Adams. No. Okay, I will move on. And I can tell you that it means dark. Oh, Katie, you did get in there in time. Katie and Adam. Katie just pipped you to the post, Adam. But dark chamber is what camera obscura means. Absolutely fabulous. Oh, I've got the whole quiz together. So let's crack on. A lens with a ratio of 1:1 or greater is known as a... Is known as a what? It's not a Joe. Nor is it a primal lens. It is a macro lens. Adam is straight in there. Adam is straight in there. You get the choir. That was outstanding. Very quick macro lens. Macros, primes. You guys, your knowledge is really good. It's getting there. So understanding all these, bringing together the equipment, the technology, the science and the creativity. That's why photography is just the best thing ever. It's a macro lens. Have I got one more? I do. This one we covered last week, DSLR or SLR. What does that stand for? DSLR. Gabe's blaming his Wi-Fi. He's blaming his Wi-Fi. I'm glad this didn't happen a few days ago, because we actually had a power cut and we had no power at all for 24 hours, which was, ooh, Gabe, I take it all back. You are straight in there with a digital single lens reflex. Fabulous. Good answer. Ah, you guys are good. You are the creme de la creme. What a good set of answers. Right. That's it. Good. That was officially the end of quiz, which gives me a chance to go to here. Now, I made this video over the last couple of days. We looked last time. We did that video. I made that video on shutter speed. And I think you guys have got a good idea of how shutter speed works. I bet you didn't know actually how the shutter worked, because it's strange that it's like a curtain. I've talked a little bit about ISO. Do you remember we looked at that photograph of Rachel's and we said that grain can be caused by having to bump up the ISO. ISO stands for International Standards Organization, and we'll get to that next week. Don't need to do it now. But aperture is the sort of missing part of the jigsaw. So what I'll do is show you this video, and I can answer any questions that you might have on it afterwards. Here you go. Let's look at the players in the Aperture demonstration. First we have Snake, the archetypal baddie. Behind Snake, about 12 inches behind Snake, we have the DeLorean, still pretty much capable of time travel, missing a rear tyre, but all the same has the flux capacitor, so no great concerns there. Next to the DeLorean we have the Time Lord Doctor Who with his sonic screwdriver, and moving on beyond Doctor Who we have the unforgettable Wally. So those are our players in our Aperture demonstration. I then set up my Z6 with a 24 to 70mm f2.8 lens, placed it on a tripod and pointed it at this unlikely set of superheroes. I put the camera into aperture mode, and that means that I set the aperture and the camera works out everything else. And initially I set the camera to f2.8, I focused in on Snake, and I took my first image, and this is what came out. Let's get super nerdy and look at the metadata or EXIF data. This is data that's saved about the image when you take it. So in this case, we're looking at the EXIF data, which stands for Exchangeable Image File Format. And we'll go through each one of these items in the list so you understand what they are. First of all, the lens, 24 to 70. That means if you twist that zoom ring, you can have a focal length between 24 and 70 mil. And that distance relates to the top of the lens, the glass, to the sensor. Now we go to focal length. In this image, I set the focal length to 70mm, so I twisted the zoom ring until that lens was 70mm from the image sensor. Alright, the next thing on the list is exposure, and that's relating to shutter speed, and we know that the 1/40 relates to 1/40th of a second. The last item is the F number, which we're looking at today, and that relates to aperture. So this is f2.8. Now unhelpfully, a small f number actually relates to a large aperture or opening, whereas a large f number relates to a small opening. Not terribly helpful, but these stops, these increments, are referred to as f-stops. Focus for a moment on the table in front of you and look at f2 as an example. Now f2 lets in twice as much light as f2.8, but only half as much light as f1.4. There are more f-stops available than shown in this diagram, but it gives you a really good idea. And also these are whole stops or full stops, and you can of course have increments of halves and quarters. It's important to understand that the amount of light is either halving or doubling as you increase and decrease these f numbers. The last and most important thing to cover before the demonstration is how the F number, the f-stop number, relates to depth of field. In technical terms, depth of field refers to the distance between the nearest and the farthest object that are regarded as being in acceptably sharp focus. It's much easier to understand this when you actually look at an image. The image in front of you shows two motorcycles. Those two motorcycles are regarded as being in acceptably sharp focus. The rest of the image is quite soft in terms of the focus. Just to throw things into slightly more confusion, it isn't only aperture that pertains to depth of field, but it's the most significant way of altering your depth of field. In this demonstration, notice how a small f-stop produces a shallower depth of field and a larger f-stop produces a wider depth of field. In our image we can see that Ninjago's snake is in sharp focus, tack sharp as it's often called. So at f2.8 we have one element in sharp focus giving us a very narrow depth of field. Everything else in the background is really blurry. If we didn't know it was Doctor Who, a DeLorean, and of course Wally, we simply wouldn't understand what was there. So let's move it up to f4 and see the difference. It's marginal. Still very soft in the background, still very blurry, with Snake still incredibly sharp. But we can't see an awful lot of difference. Let's change the aperture up to f5.6 and you can see that the background is becoming slightly less blurry and slightly sharper each time that we make one of these incremental changes to our f-stop. So let's change it up to f8 and you can see there's quite a noticeable difference in the background sharpness now. So what we've done is we've let in half as much light, but we've made the shutter speed a bit longer to compensate for less light coming in through the aperture. So let's change it up again, this time to f11, and you can now notice some detail on the car. You can make out the headlights, you can make out some detailing on the bonnet. Again, we've halved the amount of light coming in through the aperture, but reduced the shutter speed to ensure that the exposure is identical. So let's try it again. As we change to f16, you can see that again, the amount of this image that is in acceptably sharp focus is growing, and the amount of the image that's totally blurry is reducing, and that's what we're talking about with depth of field. So that's at f16, and let's change it up to the last f-stop today. At f22, we can see that we have again grown the amount of this image that is in what we might call acceptably sharp focus. It's still very soft at the back, but we can make out what's there. Now that you understand how aperture works and how it relates to depth of field, this gives you all sorts of creative possibilities when taking your images. Okay, so there we are. Does that make some kind of sense to you? It's complex, and in fact photography is quite a complex beast because you've got a lot of different variables to try to balance. And I'm going to talk about ISO next week, but we've covered shutter speed. You know what a shutter looks like, you know how it works. We've covered aperture, and by the way, that little aperture that you open up and close, that sits towards the back of a lens. If you look right into a lens, you can see that aperture. So I'm hoping that that makes some kind of sense to you, and that you understand that photography is all about balancing those two, and they both produce different effects. You can use the shutter to increase or decrease blur or to freeze things, and with aperture you can use it to increase or decrease depth of field, and also to decide what your viewer will focus on. Okay, so we have more or less come to the end. And the last thing, I was going to mention this to you. I'm going to whiz through this quite quickly because we've done about 50 minutes. Your challenge. Now, I know that most of you are using your phones, but if you were using, I know a few of you are also using slightly different cameras. And the first step when you're using a different camera is to move that dial off program mode and try to start using shutter speed or aperture mode in order to try to bring about more creativity in your photos. As I mentioned, shutter speed, freezing action, slow for artistic blur, and then aperture used to increase or decrease depth of field. And if you look at the portraits that you generally see in magazines, they tend to be with the likes of f2.8 or f1.4. They're known as fast lenses. Yeah, Katie, that's a really good question actually, and let me go back to here. That's a really good question. The shutter speed you can change on a camera. The aperture, if you're using the very latest iPhone, you can change the depth of field. And I have a suspicion that over the next 2 to 3 years, that will feed its way down to most makes of phones. There's no reason why you can't do it. Up until the very latest release of, I think, the iPhone 11, and they released a new version of iOS at the same time, iOS, you couldn't do it at all, but now you can do it. I'm not sure about Android, and it tends to be a creative thing that you can actually just increase and decrease the amount of blur. It's much easier to do on a camera than a phone, but I think you'll find that increasingly you can do it. So the answer is yes and no. You can muck around with shutter speed on every phone, but the aperture will just depend upon your phone. What you can't do on a phone is set the aperture before you take the photo. So you'll be doing it in post-processing, so it's an effect. But that will come. I'm pretty sure about that. So that's a very good question, indeed, because it's one that I meant to answer. Right. The competition. Now, the end of this term brings up the competition. So I thought this competition is live now. It's live as of about an hour ago, actually, when I set it up on Flickr. And the competition rules and where you submit the photos are in the discussion section. So you know there was a chat that I started on Introduce Yourselves and something like that. Well, there's a new one in there now, which is about this, and all the details about how you put your photos in there are explained. But you basically take the sort of URL. It's not the URL, but I explain it in there of your image, and you paste it in there. That's all you have to do. So here are the rules: 3 photos that you've taken, and you can submit 3 of your photos for the competition. And just to make this abundantly clear, photos that you're submitting are ones that you have personally taken, not ones that you found on the internet and you liked. You can then nominate 3 people for an award. So pick your favourite 3 photos and give them a yellow ribbon. And what we'll be doing is counting how many yellow ribbons people have got. So Oh, I've got 3 twice there. That's bad counting. Members should not enter into deals or bargaining with others in order to influence the outcome. The only reason I put that in there is because I've done this before, and there has been some underhand activity to try to change the result. I'm sure you guys wouldn't do it. So the way to do this properly is to put 3 of your photos on there, and then vote for the 3 favourite images that of the others have put on there, okay? And maybe just wait and do one because you think I love that, and then wait and do a second one a few days later, because you've got a week to do this. So it's open today, and it all closes down week today. So before the live stream next Monday. So I will switch it off, or make you unable to add more to it just before the live stream next week. So it would make sense to get your photos in sooner rather than later. Now these can be photos that you've already submitted, that's fine, or they can be photos that you take over the course of the week. But equally, the longer the photos are in the are there to be seen, the more likely they are to get votes. Okay. So nominations by week today, by before the live stream next week. I will draw up a short list of the 10 photos. So the ones that have received the highest number of nominations, I'll pick the top 10. And then I will speak with Ms. Fearon, with Mr. Ledbetter and Miss Brennan, and we will decide upon the winner and the 2 runners-up. I'm going to let Ms. Fearon decide, actually, because she's really keen to be involved. So I'm going to let her decide what her favourite and 2 runners-up, the second and third place, will be. And then we will announce the winners, not next week, but the week after, which will be the last the last one.